At dinner with my wife's friends, one asked how we met. She said, he basically stalked me. Look at him. Clingy, basic, and lucky I was bored. They laughed. I didn't. She kept going. I'm only with him because I don't have time to train someone hotter, her best friend added. No one else wants him. I stood, poured my drink on her head, and left. Last night. Now she's blowing up my phone. What did you do? I should have known the night was going to be a disaster the second we walked in. My name is Jordan. I'm 31 years old, living in Austin, Texas. My wife, Nina, had been hyping up this new brewery for months, claiming it was the perfect spot to catch up with her old business school friends, Marcus and Dana. The place was packed, loud with the after-work crowd from a local tech conference. I tried to settle in, but the moment we sat down, it was clear I was an outsider. Nina was already laughing with Marcus and Dana, their inside jokes flying over my head while I sipped my overpriced IPA. Marcus turned to me at one point, trying to be friendly. So, Jordan, how did you and Nina meet? He asked with a genuine smile. I started to answer, but Nina cut in before I could get a word out. Oh, it's hilarious, she said, rolling her eyes like I was some kind of punchline. Jordan basically latched onto me like a puppy. He was so clingy. I swear, he used to text me constantly. It was pathetic, really. The table fell quiet for a second, and then Dana laughed nervously. Oh, come on, Nina, she said, trying to soften the moment. But Nina was already on a roll. I'm serious, she went on. It was like he thought I was going to vanish if he didn't check in every hour. And you know what? I figured, what the hell? It's easier to stay with him than break in someone new, right? I felt my ears burn, the words cutting deeper with every second. My fingers tightened around the glass in my hand. I tried to meet Nina's eyes, but she wouldn't even look at me. Marcus glanced at me, his smile fading, but he didn't say anything either. No one did. I forced a small laugh, trying to play it off. Well, that's one way to tell it, I guess. My voice sounded small, even to me. Nina just shrugged. I mean, it's the truth. You know I can't lie. The table fell silent again, the clinking of glasses and muted music from the bar filling the gap. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I'd been dropped into someone else's nightmare. I watched her then, how she leaned back in her chair, how her fingers toyed with her wedding ring like she was bored, how Marcus and Dana exchanged glances, but neither of them had the guts to call her out. I excused myself to the bathroom, even though I didn't need to go. I just needed to breathe, to get away from that table and the humiliating words echoing in my head. When I looked at my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. Who was I? Her husband? Or just some sad story she told for laughs? When I came back, Nina was ordering another round. She smiled at me like nothing had happened, her eyes bright and empty. I sat down, my face carefully blank, and tried to pretend it didn't matter. But deep down, something in me had shifted. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just a bad night. This was who she was, and who I'd become. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I don't even remember what I ate. All I could think about was how I was supposed to be her partner, but she'd turned me into a joke. I didn't say a word on the way home. Nina didn't notice, or didn't care. She just hummed along to some song on the radio, her foot tapping on the dash like everything was fine. But for me, everything had changed. Because that night, I realized there was no safety here, no respect, and maybe there never had been. The ride home was silent, except for the music Nina had turned up too loud, the beat thrumming in my chest like a second heartbeat. I stared out the window, the neon lights of downtown Austin blurring past like a smear of color. I kept replaying her words in my head, each one cutting deeper than the last. You're just easier to keep around than breaking in someone new. I had never felt so small, so exposed. My hands were still shaking when we pulled up to our apartment. Nina didn't notice. She was humming along to the music, scrolling through her phone like the night had been perfectly normal. As soon as we got inside, I went straight to the kitchen and grabbed a glass. My fingers felt numb as I filled it with one of those fancy craft beers she'd bought. Nina wandered in behind me, setting her purse down on the counter. You're being dramatic, she said, not even looking up from her phone. It was just a joke. I didn't answer. I just lifted the glass and slowly, deliberately, tipped it over her head. The cold liquid spilled down her hair, soaking her expensive blouse, and for the first time all night, she looked genuinely shocked. Jordan, what the hell? She screeched, wiping at her face. But I didn't say a word. I just set the empty glass down and walked out the door. Outside, the humid night air felt like a slap. I leaned against my car, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. My chest felt like it was caving in, like the weight of everything she'd said was finally crushing me. I fumbled for my keys, my mind racing. I couldn't go back in there, not tonight. Maybe not ever. For a second, I considered just sleeping in the car. It wouldn't be the first time I'd chosen the cold comfort of my backseat over another fight. But then, something in me shifted. I was done being the punchline, done being the guy who swallowed his pride and let her walk all over him. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. So I forced myself to breathe, to calm down, and I went back inside. The apartment was quiet. Nina was gone, probably out with friends or crashing at Dana's place. I didn't care. The furniture looked the same, the dishes still in the sink, but everything felt alien, like I was standing in someone else's life. I sat down on the couch, the cushions sinking under my weight. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, Nina's name lighting up the screen. Again and again. Texts, calls, voicemails. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over her name. She was probably trying to spin the story already, to make me the villain. I could hear her voice in my head, that fake sweetness she used when she wanted to be forgiven. Jordan, please, you're overreacting. I was just teasing. You're being so sensitive. I felt my chest tighten again, but this time, it wasn't panic, it was anger. Real, burning anger. I blocked her number. One tap, and her name disappeared from my screen. The silence that followed was deafening. No more pings, no more little bubbles of manipulation. Just me, sitting there, breathing in the quiet. I looked around the apartment, at the pictures of us on the walls, at the memories we'd built together that now felt like a lie. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. I wouldn't give her that power. Instead, I let the silence settle over me like a blanket. I let it fill the space she'd always occupied in my head. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't have to let her back in. She could scream, she could cry, she could try to twist the story any way she wanted, but I wasn't going to listen. Because tonight, I was done. Done being the punchline. Done being the good husband who just took it. Tonight, I chose me. And that felt like the first real step forward in years. The next morning, I woke up early, even though I hadn't really slept. My eyes felt raw, like they'd been scraped with sandpaper. I made a pot of coffee, the rich smell filling the kitchen as I leaned against the counter and tried to figure out what to do next. Nina hadn't come home. She hadn't even tried to get in, as far as I could tell. Her side of the bed was still perfectly made, her perfume lingering in the air like a ghost. It felt like the final nail in the coffin. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started shoving clothes inside. I didn't bother folding them. I didn't care if they got wrinkled. I just needed to get out of that apartment. My brother, Ryan, lived about 20 minutes away in a small house on the edge of town. He'd always been the calm one, the one who knew how to fix things when life fell apart. I shot him a text as I drove. Can I crash for a bit? He replied in seconds. Of course. Come whenever. When I pulled up to his house, he was already standing on the porch, his expression carefully neutral. I got out of the car, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, and for a second I almost lost it. The weight of everything I'd been holding and hit me all at once. Hey, he said, opening the door wider. Come on in. Inside, the house was quiet and warm, smelling faintly of coffee and the lemon cleaner his wife, Kayla, loved. She was in the kitchen, pouring 2 cups of coffee like she'd been expecting me. Jordan, she said softly, you look wrecked. Sit down, okay. I nodded and sank into a chair, my bag dropping to the floor with a thud. The coffee mug was warm in my hands, grounding me as I tried to find the words to explain. Ryan sat down across from me, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. You want to tell us what happened? I took a deep breath. It was bad. Last night at dinner, Nina basically told her friends I was some pathetic hanger-on, like she was doing me a favor by staying with me. My voice shook a little, but I pushed through it. I dumped a beer on her head, walked out. Kayla's eyes widened. She said that? In front of people? I nodded, and she tried to call me after, acting like I was the one who ruined everything. I let out a bitter laugh. Typical Nina. She's probably out there telling everyone I'm volatile or crazy. Ryan's jaw tightened. I don't even know what to say, man. That's insane. I stared into my coffee, feeling like I was watching someone else's life unravel. I don't know how I didn't see it before. Or maybe I did and just didn't want to admit it. Kayla reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're here now. That's what matters. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Thanks. I just needed somewhere to be for a while. Somewhere that doesn't feel like I'm the problem. Ryan stood up and clapped me on the shoulder. You can stay as long as you want. Seriously, we've got the spare room ready for you. I nodded, managing a small smile. Thanks. As I settled into the guest room, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. When I opened it, my stomach turned. It was from Dana. Hey Jordan, I don't know if you've heard, but Nina's telling everyone you lost it last night. She says you're unstable and that you embarrassed her in front of her friends. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my brain. Of course, Nina was already rewriting the story, turning herself into the victim and me into the villain. I typed a reply with shaking fingers. Thanks for the heads up. Dana's next message came in almost immediately. I don't know what she's thinking. She said you threw a glass at her. She's calling you aggressive and unpredictable. I just thought you should know. I put the phone down and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. My head was pounding. My heart was pounding. All I wanted to do was scream. Instead, I took a deep breath and looked around the small, cozy room. The bed was made. The window cracked open to let in the fresh morning air. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I had to pretend everything was okay. Ryan stuck his head in the doorway, his face lined with quiet worry. You good? I nodded, even though I wasn't. I will be, I said, and I meant it. Because for the first time in years, I was done letting Nina's lies be the only story. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock at Ryan's door. I was lying on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying not to think about the messages from Dana. Trying not to think about how easily Nina could spin my entire life into a story where she was the victim and I was the monster. Ryan's footsteps echoed in the hallway as he went to answer the door. I didn't even get up. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to give her the chance to twist my head around again. But her voice carried through the small house like a dagger. Where is he? Nina's tone was sharp, insistent. Ryan, I need to talk to my husband. Now. Ryan didn't budge. He doesn't want to see you. I don't care what he wants, she snapped. This is between me and him. Move. I heard the quiet firmness in Ryan's voice. No. There was a pause. I could almost picture her face, how it would crumple in disbelief that anyone was telling her no. You're being ridiculous, she said, her voice dripping with scorn. I need to talk to him. He can't just hide here like some coward. I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body tight. My hands curled into fists at my sides, my chest pounding. I didn't want to see her, but part of me needed to stand up to her, to finally draw the line. I stepped out into the living room. Nina was standing there, her hair perfectly in place, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked me up and down, her eyes flashing with anger. There you are, she said, her voice soft and fake. Jordan, we need to talk. You embarrassed me last night. You humiliated me in front of my friends. Don't you think you owe me an apology? I stared at her, feeling something hard and cold settle in my chest. I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. Her eyes narrowed. You poured a beer on me. In public. Do you have any idea how that made me look? I almost laughed. Do you have any idea how it felt when you told everyone you were only with me because it was easier than finding someone new? How you called me clingy and pathetic, right to my face. Nina stepped closer, her hand reaching out like she could just smooth it all over. Jordan, you're being dramatic. You know I didn't mean it like that. I was joking. You're taking it way too personally. I flinched back from her touch. Don't. Just don't. Her lips curled into a sneer. Oh, so now you're too good for me? Hiding here with your brother like some scared little boy? Grow up, Jordan. Ryan moved to stand in front of me, blocking her view. You're not welcome here. Nina, he said quietly. You need to leave. She shoved at his shoulder, her face flushed with rage. Get out of my way. I'm his wife. Ryan didn't move. Not tonight. You're not. Nina's eyes flicked to me, desperate and hateful all at once. Jordan, she pleaded. You can't just let him block me like this. We're married. You have to talk to me. I took a breath, feeling the weight of years of biting my tongue, of shrinking myself to keep her happy. No, I don't, I said, my voice calm and steady. I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. She stared at me like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then her face twisted in frustration. Fine, she spat, stepping back and grabbing her purse off the side table. But this isn't over. You'll come crawling back when you realize how childish you're being. Ryan didn't respond. I didn't either. We just stood there, letting the silence stretch out between us. She slammed the door behind her, the sound echoing through the small house. For a moment, I didn't move. My legs felt like they were made of stone, my breath coming in slow, shaky gulps. Ryan turned to me, his expression softening. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded, even though I wasn't. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Because for the first time, I hadn't let her spin the story. I hadn't let her gaslight me into thinking it was all my fault. I'd stood up, said no, and meant it. And that felt like the first step back to myself. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of Ryan's guest room. I lay there for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of the house waking up, Ryan making coffee, Kayla humming softly as she got ready for work. It was the first morning in a long time that I didn't feel like I was bracing for some new blow. But my phone, charging on the nightstand, was a reminder that the battle wasn't over. The notifications were endless. Nina's messages had turned from angry rants to tearful apologies and back again. There were also messages from friends, some confused, some already picking sides. I sat up and took a deep breath. I had been silent for too long. Nina was already crafting her version of what happened, how I was unstable, how I embarrassed her for no reason. She was good at making people believe her, but I was done being the silent scapegoat. I opened my laptop, pulling up years' worth of text and emails, screenshots of her snide remarks, the subtle digs, the way she used to call me clingy or needy whenever I asked for a little respect. My chest was tight as I read through them, but I kept going. Line after line of little humiliations that I'd once told myself didn't matter. They did matter. They all did. I drafted a message, short, factual, and cold. I attached a handful of screenshots, just enough to show the pattern of her behavior, the way she twisted everything. I didn't want to play the victim. I wanted to set the record straight. Then I sent it to a small group of mutual friends, to her mother, to the people she was already telling her side of the story to. My fingers were shaking as I hit send, but when it was done, I felt like I could finally breathe. Ryan walked in just as I closed my laptop. "You good?" he asked, his brow furrowed. I nodded. "Yeah, I had to make sure people knew the truth. She's already trying to turn this into some story where I'm the villain." He nodded slowly. "I get it. Just be careful. People like her. They're good at playing the part." "I know," I said, my voice low. "But I'm done letting her write the story for me." For the rest of the day, I kept my phone close, but I didn't respond to any of the messages that came flooding in. Some were from friends telling me they had my back, that they'd seen through her bullshit for a long time. Others were from people who didn't know what to believe, who thought maybe I was being petty or vindictive. I didn't care. For once, I wasn't trying to win everyone over. I just needed to tell the truth. That evening, I got a call from Nina's mother, Linda. She'd always been cold to me, like she thought I was some clingy hanger-on, not good enough for her perfect daughter. But this time, her voice was different. "Jordan," she said, I didn't know it was like that. I didn't say anything. I just waited." "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice small. "I should have seen it sooner." I swallowed hard. "It's not your fault," I said, even though part of me thought maybe it was. "I just needed people to know what was really going on." She hesitated. "She's calling everyone now. Trying to, I don't know, make herself look good, I guess." I let out a breath. I figured, but I'm not going to let her. Not this time. After I hung up, I went for a walk. The evening air was warm, the sky streaked with gold and purple. I felt raw, like every nerve was exposed, but I also felt light, like I'd finally stopped carrying someone else's weight. When I got back to Ryan's, he was waiting on the porch. He didn't say anything, just handed me a beer and sat next to me in silence. We watched the sun sink behind the trees, the cicadas starting up their chorus. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about what Nina would say next. I knew there would be fallout. I knew she'd keep trying to twist the story, but I also knew that I wasn't her puppet anymore. This was my life, my story, and I was finally taking it back. The next few days felt like living under siege. Nina wasn't just spinning the story, she was rewriting it entirely. My phone kept lighting up with burner numbers, each message more desperate or more vicious than the last. "Jordan, please. I can't believe you'd do this to me. Jordan, you're ruining my life. Stop this now. You're unstable. Everyone knows it." I didn't answer. I just screenshot each one, storing them in a folder on my laptop. A record, just in case she ever tried to twist things into something even darker. Ryan watched me work in silence, his jaw tight. "You sure you're okay?" he asked one night as I sat at the kitchen table, my screen glowing in the dim light. "Yeah," I said, though I didn't really believe it. "I'm just tired. She's turning this into a performance, and I'm sick of it." My friends were splitting down the middle. Some texted me, telling me they believed me, that they'd seen how she treated me even before the night at the brewery. Others fell silent, probably too uncomfortable to pick a side. And then there were the ones who tried to play peacemaker. "Can't you two just sit down and talk it out? It's not healthy for either of you." I didn't bother replying to those. Talking it out meant letting her back in, giving her another chance to twist the narrative. I was done with that. A week after I left, I went back to the apartment with Ryan. I didn't want to go alone, didn't trust what she might say or do if I did. The place was exactly the same, the dishes still in the sink, the faint smell of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. But it felt like walking into a stranger's home. I moved quickly, gathering what was mine, a few boxes of clothes, some old records, the small things that had felt like mine in a place that was never really home. Ryan was quiet, keeping an eye on the door. Of course, that was when Nina showed up. She appeared in the doorway like she'd been waiting for me, her arms crossed, her face a mask of wounded fury. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You can't just take your stuff and leave. We need to talk about this." I didn't even look at her. "I don't owe you another conversation." She stepped in closer, her voice dropping to that syrupy sweet tone she used when she wanted to manipulate me. "Jordan, come on. You're being irrational. Let's sit down. Let's figure this out. Ryan stepped between us, his shoulders squared. He said, "No, Nina, back off." She shot him a glare. "This isn't your business." "It is now," he said calmly. "You don't get to talk to him like that anymore." For a second, she just stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't believe someone was actually standing up to her. Then she turned that cold, cutting look back on me. "You think you're so noble now, don't you?" She spat, walking out like you're some hero. "But everyone sees what you're doing. You're turning people against me, Jordan." I took a deep breath. "I'm just telling the truth." Her mouth twisted. "You're pathetic." I didn't answer. I just picked up the last box and turned to Ryan. "I'm done here." We walked past her, her hands balled into fists at her sides. She didn't move, didn't say another word. And as I walked down those stairs for the last time, I realized how little power she really had over me anymore. Outside, the sun was setting behind the skyline, the air warm and thick. Ryan loaded the boxes into his trunk while I stood there, taking it all in. The apartment wasn't home. Nina wasn't home. None of it had ever been real. I climbed into the passenger seat and closed my eyes as Ryan pulled away from the curb. My phone buzzed again, a new number this time, another desperate message. I didn't even read it. I just blocked the number and let the silence wash over me. The cost of this was high. My chest felt hollow, my head full of static. But it was worth it, because with every message I ignored, with every step I took away from her, I felt a little more like myself again. A little more like someone who didn't have to be a prop in her story. A little more like someone who was finally free.